Warning, this video is intended for adult collectors. It contains plastic collectibles, questionable opinions, and the guy that won't leave Scott McNeil alone. You have been warned. This is Random Review.
Before we begin, thank you very much to Joe T for joining the Patreon campaign. Thank you very much for the contribution. Actually, I know who that is. Good to see you back. Glad you're back on the Patreon. So thank you, and thank everyone who is a part of that, because even if it's only $1 a month, it keeps the daily content coming, keeps me active on this channel. So thank you very much for doing that. All right. So we talked about Scrapper yesterday, so now we have to talk about the other big scooper machine of the Constructicons, and that would be Bonecrusher, the deluxe out of the Studio Series 86 lineup, at least the ones that are currently available. Bonecrusher, I'm going to warn everybody right off the bat, this is going to be one of those more dull-looking figures because everything about the original Bonecrusher toy was flat green. So don't be surprised if it's going to look dull throughout, and even here in its basic bulldozer mode, you can see that, yeah, like, it's a lot of flat green. Now, just like yesterday, it is that paler, more, a little bit more lifeless shade of lime green that they are using for this run of Constructicons. I don't think it looks bad, but it's certainly not as vibrant as it was in the past, so that might be an issue for some of you out there. Now, to try and give this guy a little bit of a deco, they have painted the front grills in the traditional Constructicon purple, and they've also added a little bit of silver to the side of the treads. Not a lot, just enough to kind of make the endpoints stand out a little bit. Deco-wise, this design has always been underwhelming. Nothing really to avoid that. At least the rear looks solid enough, I'll give it that. We look toward the front, you can see the Decepticon logo there, tampographed into the center of the scoop, which I will at least say on this one, like, at least the scoop moves up and down, so you can kind of actually play with it as an actual bulldozer. Though I will say, you have no wheels on the underside. Like, there is nothing here that is actually going to make this an actual rolling toy. People in the comment section yesterday suggested that I need to put down like a mouse pad or like a desk mat or something so I can have a little bit of traction on this surface and demonstrate rolling. That is true. That is actually not a bad idea. Unfortunately, it will not help this time, will it? So, it is what it is. This is just what it needs to be. Bog standard bulldozer. Now, the sculpting to it is nice. You can see a lot of like interior greeble to get that heavy machine look to it. Tank treads are sculpted well. The grill is sculpted. And you do have at least some points of accessory points where 5mm weapons can fit in the top. Now, it's going to be a little bit limited because you have this smokestack here in the front. But that is what it is. I will say, at the very least, it does look nice and solid compared to how Scrapper looked yesterday. There's no gigantic gaps in it. A few little ones here and there, but nothing deal-breaking, nothing that's like tremendously bad. So, before we get into the robot mode, let me go ahead and show you what you got for the combining mode. We separate the treads like this. We can fold out what will eventually be the forearm of Devastator's left arm. And just like the Combiner War version, it's the top half of the bulldozer that's going to form the bicep. This rotates like this, and I assume it's going to be in this position. So you press down the rest of the arm for Devastator here. And I say that because this is the side of the elbow that seems to have the most movement. And yeah, as you can see, yeah, he's going to have bicep rotation as well. If this works like the Combiner War version, and it should, these treads will probably click in somewhere on hook. That way, this doesn't just be like a floppy thing that's just floating around doing nothing. But you can definitely tell where the main connection point's going to be. So, the only little bit of analysis I have for you before we actually start transforming. So, we're just going to leave that as our first transformation step, right? So, beyond that, I am going to start pushing, start opening this up. I'm going to fold this down so I can get the arms out. The arms are going to separate out from here. Click all the way down like so. I'm going to get this out of the way now so I can fold up what will eventually be the legs. Hang on. There we go. Fold that into a nice big block like that. Unclip the legs, because you'll have these little tabs here. And then fold the pelvis section back. All is forming like this nice big block here in the center. I'm going to go ahead and flip up the head now. I don't like when the head has to come halfway through the transformation. I always like the head reveal to be last, but, it's what it is sometimes. And I'm going to have to get the chest done, too. You do that by taking all these double hinges and finding the tab to close in like that. Snap the chest up like so. From there, unfold that big block section from the bulldozer. Rotate things around until the elbows face forward and the shoulders go down. Just like that. I'm going to go ahead and open up the bottom of the treads here. That's going to form the feet. That bicep, the forearm for Devastator needs to fold down onto his back. The canopy needs to fold down. And that's the transformation for Bonecrusher. I will say, at the very least, it's a little bit more satisfying than it was for, say, Scrapper yesterday. There's a little bit more to it. I like all the extra levels of transformation he has. So, transformation-wise, a little bit more interesting than his Voyager price point leader. But, I don't know, so at the very least, it does feel a little bit more satisfying to mess with. Now, with Scrapper, we had to have a conversation about size, and we're going to have to do the exact same here. So, all the Constructicons have to be the same size if they're going to be accurate to how they were on screen, so no surprise that Scrapper is a little bit small for a Voyager, compensated by the fact that it comes with a large set of accessories and the extra engineering it takes in order to get the Devastator components in there. However, Bonecrusher is going for the opposite. His accessory loadout is minimal. However, he is considerably larger than your standard deluxe in the Studio Series line. So that's where you're getting the balance. One big deluxe, one small Voyager. You're basically averaging the price between the two when you buy the two as a pair. So that's where the money's balancing out right now. So, for everyone freaking out about the size of Scrapper for the price point, just remember, Bonecrusher is quite big and actually fairly heavy for a Studio Series Deluxe. Now, I think some of the budget, again, we can attribute to just, paint detail because, he doesn't have a whole lot going on here because that's entirely accurate to the character, both in show and in the original toy. I think what's going to get people on this one is just proportions. So he does have a big backpack, that giant forearm for Devastator in particular, but also he is looking rather big and dumpy. You can see how thin his arms are compared to the body itself. And then if we take a good look at his proportions, he is kind of wide-hipped, kind of it's kind of a little bit swollen in proportions. It's what it has to be, but it's definitely not the cleanest Bonecrusher has ever looked. So that's going to detract some people from him as an individual toy. Beyond that, there is some paint we can talk about. The hands have been painted in purple, which is accurate, makes them stand out a little bit. I like all the chest details being individually painted. That scoop as the chest has always been his signature look. So good to see that they actually kept some detail in there. Close-up of the head does show a little bit more of an interesting sculpt than Scrapper. He still has the same flat top head that a lot of the Constructicons do, and the eye visor as well. But there is a little bit more detail and depth going on. In particular, he's got that chin line going around, a little bit of a crest on the forehead as well. Still a little bit more simple as a head, as all the Constructicons tend to be, but it's not as bad. I do think it's at least a little bit more interesting of a sculpt they went for here. Beyond that, honestly, not a lot to talk about. Most of the sculpted detailing was visible in the vehicle mode. Obviously, there's not a lot of paint to talk about. He just kind of looks pudgy and simple in design detail. Just kind of like the circumstances of being like one of Devastator's arms, I guess. Though, that's not even not fair. Scavenger's going to be more interesting. But let's go into the articulation so we can at least see how that turned out. So the head does rotate 360 degrees. You also get the transformation hinge, giving you a little bit of back and forth on the head as well. Ball joints in the shoulders means full rotation and movement there. There's no bicep swivel, but there is an elbow joint with the ball, so that has full bend and full rotation there. Nothing at the waist. Well, actually, that's a lie. If I take that down, he does have a waist joint. He can't use it because if I angle his waist, that's how he looks. It's weird to me that Scrapper seemed like he could engineer in and make room for a waist joint and doesn't have it, whereas this guy, I know for a fact, like he's not going to be able to use a waist joint with all those double hinges going from pelvis to chest, and yet he does have a waist joint. It's just useless. Big ball joints in the shoulders, like very large, or in the hips rather, but like very large ball joints in the hips. That has a lot of friction to it. The knee has a detent to it to lock it into the tread position, which I hate when they do, but it's not terrible. You can still get a subtle pose out of the knee, which is fine. And beyond that, it bends 90. Thigh rotation works. Ankle tilt works. So unfortunately, yeah, for a modern deluxe, he does come up a little bit short in the articulation department. Some swivels that I really wish was there. He does come up, like a lot of these, more articulated than his Combiner War version, but it's still coming with some sacrifices here. You know, obviously he's not I don't think he's quite as aesthetically pleasing. But that said, here, we can accessorize him with this little pea shooter of a pistol. This struck me weird because it seemed like too small and too basic to be his gun, but going back to the original toy had a much different design, different color even. No, this comes straight from the animation. In particular, it's the gun I noticed him using in Carnage in C minor. Yeah. So, accessory-wise, not great. And really, that's going to do it. I wish I had a little bit more to talk about, but by his very design nature, there's not a lot to talk about when it comes to Bonecrusher. The articulation is low-ish for a Studio Series Deluxe. The color scheme is flat because that's entirely accurate to the character, which makes sense, but is also visually unappealing. And then, of course, the accessory count is kind of puny. It's really all he can come with, but you know, maybe his toy accurate gun to spice up the figure a little bit more would have been nice too. Really, what he has going for him is a more interesting transformation than Scrapper, and we'll see if that holds up amongst his teammates. But for now, that's Bonecrusher, and he's, I don't know, on his own, a little on the dull side. But let's be honest, most of you are going to keep him as a left arm anyway, so he's still accomplishing his goal. So there you go. That's the review. Hope you enjoyed. Hope you learned something. And as always, I will see you next time.
Hello everyone, I am Astral Agent Magnetar, a Tokusatsu VTuber, and I am streaming 4 times a week over on Twitch, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday afternoons, and a special late night one on late Friday/early Saturday. So come watch, come hang out, and let's make an impact together.